What's up, fellas? How's it going?
How's it hanging?
It's hanging. It's hanging. I'm a little pissed off at the Rangers game.
Yeah.
I would like to say, just so we know, we just went live on YouTube, Twitter, and the Soccoa Media app and MixLR. So just everyone out there, check us out. Hit us up with comments. If you have any comments on YouTube or Twitter, hit us up. We have actually got a question that came in today on Twitter.
I saw that.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely get to it. But I guess to throw it out there to everybody, basically this is the MLB Hall of Fame roundtable discussion as the ballots are starting to filter in to probably, I think this guy doesn't get enough credit, at least on any other level other than on social media, it seems like. But if you go on Twitter, his name on Twitter is not Mr. Tibbs. It's Ryan Thibodeau, who is the guy that's in charge, that he has pretty much people sending their ballots, whoever makes them public, and he puts them into this incredible spreadsheet that I'm sure we're all going to be looking at some point here tonight, and basically keeps track of the votes that come in, and they really do project where guys are going to finish within the Hall of Fame balloting. Of course, the Hall of Fame ballots are actually due in 2 days from all the writers that are out there, and just so everybody needs to know here, there's about 397 registered baseball writers that are people that partake in the voting for the Hall of Fame. That number obviously needs to be adjusted a little bit as they're projecting 392. Unfortunately, there were some writers who passed away this year that obviously will not have a vote, as mean as that might sound. And it's just incredible at what this guy does. So basically, this is just going to be the roundtable talk amongst the fellas here. We are also going to have a first-time voter joining us at 10:30. It is going to be Bill Evans of New Jersey Advanced Media. He casted his first ever vote as a BBWAA writer. So that's going to be exciting to get his take on things. And it's really interesting because I'm sure the four of us, along with some of these voters, and of course, we'll get into this whole conversation of where everybody is when it comes to PED users. Should they be in? Of course, we've seen already 2 blank ballots come in. So it's really interesting. I think, guys, before we really get into it, I just kind of want to lay it out there for everybody. I pulled up the voting rules and what the eligibility is, and I think probably the one line in this whole eligibility is pretty comical considering what we're going to talk about. And then, of course, we'll talk about the guys that are on the ballot. There are a few guys that are in their last year of the ballot. Of course, a few years back, it was changed that instead of 15 years, you're only allowed to be on there for 10 years before it goes to the Veterans Committee after you're knocked off the main ballot. So real interesting. So real quick, just the names that are going to be throwing out there that are on this ballot as of right now. In their final years, well, we got the PED guys, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Kurt Schilling, and Sammy Sosa. Those are the guys that are in their 10th and final year on the ballot. Other names on this ballot, you have Bobby Abreu in his 3rd year, Mark Burley in his 2nd year, Todd Helton in his 4th year, Tim Hudson in his 2nd year, Torrey Hunter in his 2nd year, Andrew Jones in his 5th year, Jeff Kent in his 9th year, Andy Pettit in his 4th, Manny Ramirez in his 6th, Scott Rowland in his 5th, Gary Sheffield in his 8th, Omar Vizquel in his 5th, Billy Wagner in his 7th, and then you have the first-time guys that are making the ballot for the first time this year: Tim Lincecum, Joe Nathan, David Ortiz, Jonathan Papelbon, Alex Rodriguez, Jimmy Rollins, and Mark Teixeira. And before we get into it, guys, I mean, you look at the names on this ballot, it's exactly what we expected. I mean, obviously, when you look at these names, and I'm sure all the thoughts that have been thrown out there about each of these guys, but let's take a look at the guys that are in their final years in the ballot. I mean, this is make or break for them, right?
You're a little muted there.
It's definitely make or break. Yeah, I was muted. Sorry, I was taking a sip of High Noon. No free plugs. I think the final year and the PED is going to be the issue, and I have a real problem with that. And I would love I know the guy we're bringing on tonight is a non-PED voter, but at a certain point, when are you going to call enough? The MLB allowed it. Bud Selig knew it was going on. I mean, the coaches, everybody in the locker rooms knew it was going on. If you're going to tell me that they're okay with, after the lockout, that the whole Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire bringing baseball back to the TVs and making them billions of dollars as an organization, it's okay for PEDs then, but when they say enough is enough, then all of a sudden it's cheating. And I'm absolutely disgusted by people that will continuously use the cop-out, the purity of the game. The game was never pure. Let's call it what it is. Back in Mickey Mantle's era, they were using friggin' what's it called?
Greenies, amphetamine.
Yeah, amphetamines. They're using amphetamines. I mean, you had guys drinking in the dugout, in the locker room between innings. I mean, you're going to tell me alcohol doesn't loosen you up before an at-bat? I know I play better golf when I'm drinking on the course.
I played better baseball when I was drunk.
Dude, they did a sports science on I'm using golf as an example because they actually did a sports science on drinking and golfing, and most pros got better when they had a couple pops in them because it makes you looser. So you can't draw a line saying, all right, these guys were known steroid users when half of them never, ever tested positive in their career. It's all hearsay. So at the same point, if you're going to allow Houston Astros to actually maintain that World Series ring, if you're going to allow the next year the Red Sox to maintain that World Series ring when we know they both fucking cheated, you got to call a spade a spade. It's bullshit. You can't exclude guys because you want to keep the integrity of the game, but at the same time, oh, hey, we're not going to screw any players over and suspend anybody for knowing what pitch is coming. If you're going to sit there and tell me as a professional athlete that steroids makes you a better player versus sitting at the plate and knowing a fucking fastball is coming down the middle, you're full of shit. Okay? Because any one of us right now that has ever had a little bit of athletics, if you're standing at the plate and you know a fastball is coming, there's a chance you're going to fucking make contact. Okay? And now multiply that by an athlete, a friggin' full-on all-star athlete knowing a fastball is coming. It's not breaking. You know that where that ball's starting. You're guessing where it's going, and you're swinging for the fences. It's bullshit. I'm tired of it.
So glad I did this.
My thoughts about the Baseball Hall of Fame are mixed. I've gone to the Hall of Fame. You and I have taken a trip to the Hall of Fame.
Yes, sir. Before. Me, you, and my pops.
And my thoughts on the Hall of Fame. I'm kind of like, there's an episode of Blue Mountain State where they're questioning the NCAA rules, and the quarterback Alex Moran goes down a rabbit hole of, well, who put the NCAA in charge? And then he finds out that the NCAA was never actually put in charge by anybody, and they just came in one day and decided that they were in charge. And my mind is kind of going that way toward the Baseball Hall of Fame because it is not the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. It's basically the Baseball Writers of America, Association of America's Hall of Fame, and maybe we need to take it away from them because who gave them the right to decide who deserves to be there? I didn't vote for that, and I can guarantee you nobody back in 1940 whatever when they first started the damn thing voted for them to have a say in who's a great baseball player and who's not a great baseball player. A group of people that never played the game at a professional level decided who the greatest baseball players were. And it's really quite ridiculous. And in my head, I'm trying to figure out what gives you the right? Who do you think you are? What gives you the right? That's what I'm thinking of right now. I feel like Michael when Toby quits the office, and he's just like, I just got a couple questions for you. Who do you think you are? What gives you the right? And I think it's a fair question. I could see like in the WWF Hall of Fame, Vince McMahon decides who goes in the Hall of Fame. You know why? Because he owns the WWF or WWE rather. But who gave these people the right to decide who belongs in? Like, I really want to know. They are not a jurisdiction of baseball by any stretch of the imagination. So what gives them the right? I just don't get it.
I think the end all be all is the fact that Pete Rose is not in the Hall of Fame, and he never screwed over the fans. He didn't cheat. He broke a rule set forth by the MLB, and I understand that rule, and I understand the type of guy Pete Rose was and the continual fucking bullshit that he laid out for the MLB. But at the end of the day, when you're breaking down the greatest players of all time, Pete Rose is a fucking first ballot Hall of Famer. And because the MLB decided you broke a rule and we're never letting you in baseball ever again, I have a problem with that because you can't – his stats on the field don't dictate what he did after the fact. Okay, you want to arrest him?
Listen, I got a problem with the fact that they gave him the opportunity to clean his hands. Say, hey, we'll let you in. Just tell us the truth. And he lied to them 3 times. And then he makes commercials about how he's not in the Hall of Fame, like it's a joke.
I understand that, Nick. But if you're talking about the game, purely for the game, the guy that stacked up the most fucking hits in the MLB and he's not in the Hall of Fame, kiss my ass. What he did after he played doesn't matter. What he did after he played doesn't fucking matter.
Wait. Let
Rook speak here.
He's out. His computer's all fucked up.
I gotta hear his take on this.
So
I don't think he heard any of us. His speakers don't work.
All right, it's working now though. So fuck you guys. Anyway, so here we go. This is my thing when it comes to Hall of Fame. Is if you're going to be against steroids, at least be against steroids across the board. Don't pick and choose, guys.
PEDs.
Right? PEDs. I'm sorry. PEDs. Performance enhancing drugs. Alleged use, whatever it is. If you're going to be across the board, be across the board. And I'm going to call some people out because I'm looking at this Hall of Fame tracker that you sent me, Joe. And this Ian Harrison and David Huff. I got a problem with you guys. You both voted for David Ortiz in the first ballot, but you don't vote for Roger Clemens or Barry Bonds. If it's going to be okay for David Ortiz or A-Rod. If it's okay, well, obviously, I actually don't know if they voted. I don't think they did vote for A-Rod. Yeah, they didn't. They didn't vote for A-Rod. And it's, if you're going to vote for one guy who's allegedly used PEDs, who's in the report, just like the rest of these guys are, granted, A-Rod had the suspension. Bonds, once again, is alleged in the report. Clemens, allegedly in the report. But if you're going to
I just want to point out real quick before you keep going, A-Rod had a suspension because A-Rod didn't get suspended for failing a test. He got suspended for going to a doctor who was dealing steroids to other people that got caught doing steroids.
He also admitted that he did it.
Yeah,
he didn't have to. He could have sat there and sued the whole world and said, "Fuck you all. I'm running away with this."
Nick, I don't cut you off.
You're not powerful enough.
Just finish my point. If you're gonna do it once, you're gonna have to do it for everybody. David Ortiz is an alleged PED user. He's in that list of guys. Just because he's nice to the media, which is the Baseball Writers of America, this association, just because he's nice to you doesn't mean that he gets in first ballot Hall of Fame. Jeff Kent is just as good as a ball player, and he hated the media. He's better to the media. He's better, and he's not in. Okay, so if you can't just do it to the guys who are nice. Oh, this guy's nice to us.
Well, the guys who are nice to you.
It's really interesting is that I'm actually in agreement with Rook here because I'm of the mindset of I personally don't believe anybody that used performance-enhancing drugs should be in the Hall of Fame, and I think that's where TJ and I are going to disagree on, especially after his rant before. And I also don't think and this is where the hypocrisy of these writers come in, and this is where it kind of ties into what Rook is saying. Like, if you're going to be across the board and not vote, if you're going to vote for David Ortiz, which in my opinion, then David Ortiz doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. And right now he's trending. His numbers are trending that he's going to get in, but he might just barely make it in.
He's a DH. So
my whole thing is that I don't believe I'm a traditional baseball fan when it comes down to this. I don't think Bud Selig should be in the Hall of Fame because he's the one that turned a blind eye to it. And that's where the hypocrisy is going to start. They allowed him to come in. So now you have these writers who, again, we'll get into it because me personally, there's too many damn writers that are able to vote in this whole process. Okay. I like it when there's a committee, when there's a smaller committee. I think the Veterans Committee is like 12 people. I believe the Football Hall of Fame voting committee is a small committee. Okay. You're right. And this is where it also goes into what Nick was saying, that like what gives all these guys the right, So my whole thing is I'm a traditional baseball fan. I don't believe anybody that used performance-enhancing drugs deserves to be in it. That includes A-Rod. That includes some of the people that might be in this Hall of Fame already, a.k.a., sorry to say it, Mike Piazza. He was allegedly in one of these reports as well. There's so many different guys, and this is where the hypocrisy comes in, and that's why I'm going to be real curious to see what our guest, Bill Evans, talks about here because, he is a first-time voter. I'm curious as to where he's coming from because you have a lot of these newer writers who are, amongst this generation who kind of is like, let them in and stuff like that. With PEDs, they did their punishment and stuff like that. Maybe now with Bonds and Clemens in their 10th year of eligibility, maybe we'll just finally get them in because also the ballot has kind of opened itself up for them. If you go back to the last couple of years, the ballot has been crowded. Voters also went from voting from 15 guys down to 10 guys. So there's so many different things that are going into it. But me personally, I'm in the same boat with Ant in regards to, at least if you're going to be hypocritical, at least be hypocritical across the board. Don't vote for David Ortiz, but you're not going to vote for Barry Bonds and Clemens. I don't think any of those guys should be in there whatsoever, but you can't say you're going to put one in. And then I think I've seen a couple of ballots, and I know we'll get through it, where it's mind-boggling that they have Bonds, Clemens, and Ortiz, but don't have A-Rod.
Well, yes, I saw that.
This is A-Rod's first year?
A-Rod's first year, yeah.
A-Rod's first year.
That you also got to take into consideration they do stupid stuff like that.
I know there are voters that are like, let me vote for these 10 so I can kind of get them out of the way type of thing. There are
also guys that are like, well, he can't be unanimous. He can't get more of a vote than the other guy. Even though is he a Hall of Famer? Yeah. Not this year though, because he can't be better than the other guy. That's impossible.
Okay, hold on. But he can't be unanimous. A-Rod, let me tell you something. This is how I always looked at it. Barry Bonds, A-Rod, they're Hall of Famers by numbers alone. They're Hall of Famers by numbers alone. The numbers don't lie. But, when you have the steroids cloud around you, it's just that's what's going to happen. So that's where I want to play it.
Real quick, again, I have a couple problems with the whole steroid era. One, just because you didn't fail a test doesn't mean that you weren't on the juice. I mean, there's plenty of guys that they lift light weights, right? They don't go heavy. They lift light. Like Roger Clemens doesn't look like a steroid abuser. He looked like a fat guy. That's what he looked like. I wouldn't think anybody was sitting there watching Roger Clemens in the end of his career going, oh, this guy's on the juice. Look how jacked he is. He really wasn't. I want to say Bonds. Yes, Bonds was gigantic at the end of his career. A-Rod, again, if you saw A-Rod without a shirt on when he was 35, he kind of just like a dad bod walking down the beach with Kate Hudson or whoever he was dating at the time. So A-Rod, honestly, never failed a drug test, at least not one that David Ortiz didn't also fail. Because David Ortiz was on the same report.
Dude, what about Andy Pettit? Andy Pettit gets prescribed something during his recovery that he didn't realize he couldn't take. And then now all of a sudden he's a steroid abuser as if he's sitting there shooting up HGH and trying to hit home runs.
Here's my other problem with the whole situation is in the cases of Bonds, Pettit, and Clemens, their accusations of taking performance-enhancing drugs come from criminals, people that were going to jail, and the federal government put them in a room and were like, give us some names or it's going to be worse. And they were like, fine. They would have sold out their mom if it would have got them out of jail that day.
Rook, let me ask you, in a court situation, can you trust the word of a criminal? Is that admissible in court, the word of a criminal?
Only if he's talking about another criminal.
Well, think about...
It would depend on the situation, to be honest with you. I mean, you're allowed to use, so if you have a criminal who's testifying and they've been convicted, you could use that to impeach their credibility, but whether or not the testimony is truthful. So, I mean, obviously these guys never came to the level of going to actually testify in a court. They testified at probably the federal hearing and congressional hearings. They're a little bit different rules. So I can't get into that. But I mean, if someone comes in who is a convicted, known felon, and there is a record of them being convicted and it's not expunged at that point, and they're coming to give testimony of all this, and that, then yeah, you're allowed to use their history as long as it's within 10 years of their of the time they're testifying. And you can use it to impeach their credibility to whether or not they could be truthful. So if they have someone who is convicted of, forgery or fraud, then you could say, well, he convicted of fraud and forgery before. Who's to say that he's now not
right? But the first step is obviously picking apart their credibility before they can even give the testimony.
Well, so usually the people who are proposing them or putting them at that proffering their testimony is usually the person that's using them in favor of them. So it's going to be on the cross-examination where you're going to go into it regarding to find out, all right, well, were you ever convicted of a crime? What was that crime? That crime was forgery. All right, so, how many years ago was it? What did you do? And you get into that, and you get into his background.
Right, but you're allowed to pick apart their credibility to see if the jurors are going to trust the word of a dude that's obviously shady. And I honestly think that none of these guys tested positive. Most of these guys, I should say, tested positive, okay?
As far as we know, because if you go back to that 2004 report, it's amazing how only certain names were kind of leaked out from that report, and baseball was kind of trying to keep that under wraps. So that's where it's like,
I'll tell you, there was two things. One, if it was me and I were A-Rod and that came out, my name got leaked from a test that I took under good faith with the assumption that my name would not get released, right? I would have sued that reporter for libel.
Well, didn't he sue Major League Baseball a couple of years?
No, I would have sued that reporter from the Sports Illustrated that wrote that article. I'd have been like, "Oh, you're not going to release who your sources are? Then you're a fucking liar, and I'm going to make sure that you can't afford to buy milk for the rest of your life. You'll be drinking black coffee, sweetheart." I would have ruined her life.
But
and you know what? People would have hated me for it, but they hate him anyway. So what difference does it make?
To add to that point, let's not pretend that sports writers aren't malicious in what they write. I mean, look how long it took for them to go on the offensive against Aaron Rodgers and kind of try to blackball him and all out attack him because he wasn't vaccinated. And all of a sudden, you know what? Yeah, one sports writer decides, screw Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to make a name for myself and throw this guy under the bus. It's a malicious attack against a player for something silly. Let's not act like sports writers have agendas against certain players.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't have agendas. They do.
So
right.
Before we really get into the thick of it, because I want to definitely just go through just the requirements of the BBWAA before we bring in our guests in just a couple of minutes. And then
by the way, I threw that in Craigslist one time. Some weird stuff comes up.
I was going to say that sounds really dirty.
That's what she said.
Doesn't it? And especially, like I said, for those that are not looking at home, I would just suggest following this guy. It's on this spreadsheet. We're going to go into the numbers. I mean, this guy literally breaks everything down in this tracker. It's insane. But real quickly, and this is where I always laugh, even though I know the rules of eligibility, I laugh at some of the lines in the baseball writers, how the Hall of Fame election requirements are done. So, first of all, in order for you to be an elector, you have to be covering the sport actively for at least 10 years. So you have to be a baseball writer covering the sport as a whole or with a team for 10 consecutive years in order for you to be eligible to vote, which, okay, fine. I like that. You're around the game for 10 years. Sure, whatever. Then, obviously, what happens is it's 5 years after a player retires is when they're eligible for the ballot. So now here's the other thing is, again, we said it, an elector will vote for no more than 10 eligible candidates. That's down from 15. And then you need 75% of the votes to get in to the Hall of Fame. But again, this is the number one line that I love so much because this is what we'll really get into when we're talking about these guys that are on this ballot. Voting shall be based upon the player's record, playing ability, integrity, sportsmanship, character, and contribution to teams on which the player played. Biggest ones there, integrity and sportsmanship.
So Ty Cobb's getting kicked out.
And listen, racist? Yeah, absolutely.
But I know Ty Cobb wasn't a racist. He hated everybody equally.
Yeah, he did. And this is where, even going back to, because like I said, in a couple of minutes, we're going to be bringing in our guest, but going back to what you guys were talking about at the top of this show and when both Nick and TJ were going into your rambling rants about how guys, back in the day, drinking and doing those type of drugs. I think it's a little bit different when you're comparing drugs like amphetamines or even just being drunk at the plate to performance enhancing drugs to get
amphetamine is a performance enhancing drug.
Like what defines your point? Let me ask you something right now. If one of these guys that was using spider tack, are they now banned from the Hall of Fame?
That's performance enhancing. It's not a drug, but it's a performance enhancing substance.
100%. And it would be really interesting to see, though, if, listen, how long has Garrett Cole used it for? Now are his number. That's what I'm saying. So I get it. This is where you kind of teeter the line of, all right, what are we talking about here? Because you go back to what was it? The report was in 2004, right? That was the major report. What about the Mitchell report? I think the Mitchell report was separate from the 2004 report. So again, I understand you're teetering this line because it's like, all right, well, you're talking about guys that, you know, the 86 Mets basically won on cocaine and shit like that, you know, like, so I get it. I understand where people who like you guys
allegedly won on cocaine, just to correct you.
I'll tell you right now, everybody
I
wants
saw
to
freaking
act
Brock
like,
Gooden sniffing the first baseline. Are you kidding me?
dude, everybody wants to act like doing steroids
Allegedly.
is going to make you a better baseball player. Doing steroids does not increase your hand-eye coordination at all. Doing steroids gives you a recovery time that's a lot faster than it normally would be. Your muscles recover faster. You can lift more. You can put on some bulk, but it doesn't allow
these guys though. Barry Bonds comes in to camp one year and he's looking like he's got 30 pounds of muscle.
And how many Silver Slugger awards did Barry Bonds win when he was 162 pounds?
Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer without the steroids. Either way,
I mean, come on. He was
He
was a multiple-time Silver Slugger award winner before he did steroids.
Prior to the steroids, when he was with Pittsburgh, insane numbers. Then you get to the Giants and things start happening, and it's like, all right, things are a little bit inflated and whatever the case may be.
So still a Hall of Famer.
So he's a Hall of Famer number-wise.
Of course.
So
here's my question.
Before the alleged cloud comes around him.
So my question is, Willie Mays has admitted that he took amphetamine while playing baseball. All right. Should we kick him out of the Hall of Fame?
But what are we like again though? I get you saying amphetamine is a performance enhancing drug.
It absolutely is. It gives you the ability to go to the plate every day when you're dragging ass. It's like taking Coke and you're like, let's go. I want to go run through a wall today. Where normally you'd be like, I can't play today, Skip. I need a day off.
Think about it, stepping up to the plate and getting on base every time like it's the fucking World Series Game 7 and you're going to take the next base because you fucking need it.
What about the guy who did who threw a no-hitter on acid? Does that count as a performance-enhancing drug or no? We take away his no-hitter?
And this is why we're gonna get our guy in here. So you guys ramble on for a second while I get him on the line, and we'll ask him what he thinks.
I like how it's considered rambling when you're just dropping truth on a league that wants to base everything on purity and integrity, and it's the most bullshit fucking league in the system.
I agree too. Wait, let me get back to that. So if you use acid, is that considered a PED for no-hitter?
If anything helps you, I don't know. Doing anything you're doing out there, you don't know.
Did it enhance your performance?
He apparently was dodging out of the way of baseballs that were nowhere near him.
So my question is, if you take some Viagra before you get to the box, and you go yard with some Viagra in your system, is Rafael Palmeiro out now because he's on Viagra? Like,
hold on. I'll give you one. The old adage was boxers didn't have sex for a month or two before having a fight. Why? Because they wanted that testosterone through the roof. They wanted you to be fucking angry and mean and nasty because you haven't gotten any, and your system is flowing with testosterone that you haven't been able to ditch the poison. Okay, I think that's performance enhancing. I mean, you guys go without sex for a month, and you let me know how much you want to kill somebody.
It's a simple thing, right? Like blood doping. Blood doping is considered performance enhancing. But what really is blood doping? They take your own blood out, they store it, and then they inject it back into you.
They over-oxygenate it.
I'm sorry. Fellas. That's not even like something foreign. That's you, back in you.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. All right, so I want to bring in our guest right now. He is from New Jersey Advanced Media, Bill Evans. Bill Evans Sports is his Twitter handle. It's a complete honor to have a voter on the show here, on this live show. And for Bill, this is a big moment for him because he is a first-time voter for the BBWAA. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time coming on to the Sports Talk 365 / Scoreboard Addicts live show here. You got Joe Soccoa, you got Ant, you got Nick, and you got TJ. Bill, how you doing tonight?
Very good, guys. Pleasure to join you.
All right. So I guess the first question I got to ask you, like I said, you've been covering the sport for a very long time. We went over the rules a little bit. You got to be covering the sport for 10 years. You casted your first ever ballot for the Baseball Hall of Fame. Just go through the emotions of that, being, you know, a writer and I'm sure a lifelong baseball fan.
Yeah, it's something I've been looking forward to. I've been in the Baseball Writers Association for, actually a little over a decade. And, it kind of started, I covered the Phillies, but, been covering them since like 2005 and even a little bit before that. I've been on the beat for a while and, just being part of the BBWAA itself, I consider it an honor. And then, as you come up on that, 10-year mark, you're gonna get one of those ballots in the mail. And what was something I was looking forward to, and making sure that I took my time to, strongly consider my selections and wanted to do it right. And, do consider it an honor and a responsibility.
And speaking of your ballot, let's go through your ballot here quickly before we kind of open it up for discussion amongst the boys and yourself. So this is Bill Evans' ballot that he submitted earlier today. He selected 4 choices: Todd Helton, Jeff Kent, Scott Rowland, and Jimmy Rollins. Those were his selections for the Baseball Hall of Fame with his votes. Just go down that list there and just discuss what made you choose these 4 guys. And then, of course, leaving other guys off. Of course, everybody knows you can vote up to 10 guys. So just what went into the thought process of your voting selection?
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt like, it's to be selected, you're obviously going to be part of an exclusive group. Just because you can select 10 doesn't mean you necessarily should. I kind of felt like, that there had to be a really strong case, almost like a slam dunk in most cases. Helton was the guy I actually kind of thought was near the top of my list. Just watching him play, one of the purest left-handed swings I think I've ever seen, along with maybe like a Ken Griffey Jr., 316 batting average, career, Gold Glover, several Silver Slugger awards, All-Star teams. I know he played in Colorado. That turned some people off, but he had 287 on the road as well, and I just felt like he was the guy that to me was the most clear cut. Jeff Kent, again, you look at the position he played, second base, one of the top offensive second baseman of his generation, over 1,500 RBIs, MVP, top 10 in the MVP 4 times, knocked in 100 runs, I think 7 or 8 years. To me that was, you compare him to like a Ryan Sandberg who's in the Hall of Fame. His offensive numbers were significantly better. Sandberg was obviously a much better defensive player, and Ken played, for many years, his prime years in San Francisco, which is not really a hitter's. Either of the ballparks he played in were neither hitters' ballparks. I went back and forth a little bit on Rollins and Rowland. But again, to me, Rollins across the board, again, as a shortstop. I know these positions are evolving and they're not, necessarily defensive minded as much as they have been in the past. But still, you're not going to see the numbers at shortstop typically that you will on the corner outfield or corner infield. Just numbers across the board: 2,400 hits, 1,400 runs, 900 RBIs. The guy hit lead off most of his career, over 200 home runs, almost 500 stolen bases. 115 triples, 500 doubles. Again, multiple Gold Glove awards. MVP award. To me, he just checked off so many boxes. And then Rowland, 7 Gold Gloves, one of the best defensive third basemen I've seen play in the decades I've been watching the sport. 8 All-Star games, and a very good offensive player as well, with over 300 home runs, 280 career batting average, knocked in 105 times, scored 100 a couple times, and so when I looked at that, I just felt like they both deserve to be in, for across the board numbers, and then you tackle on the defense at the end, and I think that's what put them over the top.
Very interesting, of course, and I think you hit it on the head with a lot of your selections, and behind them, especially the offensive numbers, as you mentioned, at Todd Helton, a Jeff Kent and a Jimmy Rollins. I know the guys over here, you can't see them, but they were shaking their heads in agreement. I know Ant was a big advocate before. He was talking about Jeff Kent and how he probably should be in over a few of these guys on this list. So I want to open up the Q&A part of this, and I'm going to start first here. And I think it's the age-old question. You didn't go with any of the guys that have that PED cloud over their head. Is there any specific reason to it? Like, what's your mindset as a voter? Because I know that this has been a huge topic of discussion amongst a lot of these voters. And I know a lot of people try to get some feedback from these writers about where they stand with guys like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, and Alex Rodriguez and things of those nature. So I'm just curious as to where your thought process is with those guys and why they weren't on your ballot.
Yeah, I just felt like, that they've kind of cheated the game. And, in the case of some of those guys, I know some writers, which is their right, that they kind of make a distinction. And I do think guys like the Bonds and Clemens and A-Rod were probably Hall of Famers, before, they were even, implicated with the steroids, which to me, means they probably didn't even have to do it. I almost have more sympathy for somebody that's like a 250 career hitter just trying to hang on in the game and feeling that, somebody's doing steroids and is going to take his job. I just felt like, anybody that was kind of associated with that, I just wasn't going to put on the ballot. I wasn't going to make the distinction between, maybe Clemens was a Hall of Famer, prior to being implicated, whereas, people will say like, well, Sammy Sosa, well, he wouldn't have been, a Hall of Famer if he didn't break the rules. I just couldn't make that distinction. So I just decided to kind of eliminate anybody, who was kind of implicated in that steroid situation.
Guys?
So Bill, I got a question for you. Congratulations on getting a vote. I mean, that's a great honor, getting a vote in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I know I would be absolutely psyched, but I want to key in on something you said, somebody that cheated the game. I mean, I think the baseball itself, the MLB, has just a terrible history with, allowing people to cheat the game. Bud Selig, I think, first and foremost, you have all the alleged steroid use, you have the alleged implications that MLB knew that this was going on, that the coaches, everybody in the locker rooms knew that it was going on. And then now we're going to hold the players accountable for what the MLB allowed. I mean, after the lockout, MLB was in the dregs of, mediocrity. Nobody was watching. And then all of a sudden you have Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire bring the game back, and it was great for baseball then. And all of a sudden now it's not baseball. And I understand, the distinction of, listen, if you're cheating, you're cheating. But when you have the MLB turn a blind eye to the Houston Astros, I mean, there's proof in the pudding. I mean, we have alleged steroid use, and then there's proof. There's physical proof of the Houston Astros cheating, and yet there's not an asterisk next to that World Series. I think the whole purity of the game and keeping baseball clean and honest, I think that was tarnished right there and then.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, in a sense too. I mean, I do think Bud Selig oversaw the steroid era, and that's a stain on his legacy. And I know he's in the Hall of Fame, and I probably wouldn't have voted for him for that reason. Same thing. You bring up the Astros. When it comes down to Jose Altuve, being up for the Hall of Fame, I think that's going to be something he's going to deal with. There's going to be probably writers out there that are going to look at it and see him as part of that scandal and say, does he belong? So, I mean, I think, definitely the commissioner and Major League Baseball, has culpability here for sure. I don't absolve them of that, but, just looking at the players themselves, obviously I don't, those are the ones that I have to kind of make a decision on. So that was just kind of the way I went. Good.
Listen, I agree with it. And I like your selections. I can definitely agree with them. And I like the fact that you went pure across the board. You have standards and you kept to those standards. And it seems that some of the writers are voting in somebody like David Ortiz, but want to leave A-Rod out and Clemens out. And it's kind of like one of those, well, if you let one steroid guy or alleged steroid guy get in, is that going to open up the floodgates? Because I mean, at a certain point, it would have to. If you're going to set the standard that one alleged steroid guy can get in and another one can't, I think there's going to be a clear, line in the sand of, wait a minute, you allowed one, but not all. And these guys' numbers are far better than David Ortiz.
Yeah. And I mean, and there are different levels, I think. I mean, I'm sure, I know Ortiz's situation, and even the commissioner had kind of said that he wasn't sure if his sample was a clear, true positive and all that, where some of the others were more clear. So I mean, I think you do have to look at each case, in some cases individually. I think working against Ortiz a little bit too is playing DH. He only had to kind of play half the game. I think that's something that you kind of look at, wonder if he had to be out there for 9 innings or more every game, whether he would have put up the same offensive numbers. But then obviously he does have the questions about steroids as well.
So Bill, how you doing? It's Nick here. Good evening. Again, I'll echo TJ's sentiments about congratulations on getting your vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame. A huge responsibility to the game that we all love and has been a huge part of our lives. And my question for you is, with your feelings toward persons that have been suspected or are guilty of taking performance-enhancing drugs, would you go on a limb out to say that those who have admitted to taking amphetamine during the 60s, should they not be in the Hall of Fame? Should they now be removed from the Hall of Fame? I'm wearing a Mickey Mantle jersey on right now, and it's been noted that Mickey Mantle got injections of amphetamine from Dr. Max Jacobson so that he could play, and in 1961 got a nasty infection and was out for a good chunk of the season because of it. And the effects of amphetamine are very simple. You get amphetamine and you may be dragging it a little bit this week. You get that booster shot, and next thing you know, you can play the next 5 days and it's not a big deal. Whereas the guy who's not doing that are they're not playing those 5 games. They're sitting down a day here, a day there. And the other question I have for you is, we have some evidence, whether it be maybe coming from people who are less than reputable or from somewhat suspect testing. Does that mean that the people that are currently getting voted in, like let's say for instance, and just for argument's sake, and I'm not saying this is the case, but let's say for argument's sake, Todd Helton took steroids but never got caught. I mean, can you say without a doubt that he never did performance enhancing drugs, that all the guys that are not quote unquote guilty right now never did performance enhancing drugs during the steroid era?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I can say that, and I don't want to, say, hey, Todd Helton could have done steroid. I mean, I don't think that's fair to Todd Helton. I mean, we as from what we know of, he didn't, and that's kind of what I'm going on. Same thing with the other players that I picked. I mean, if it comes out later on that they did, then that would probably change my vote. If they were already in the Hall of Fame at that point, I mean, that would, I guess, be up to the Hall to make that determination. I don't want to, kind of play a hypothetical with somebody that hasn't really been implicated, or you don't think has done it. So, and that's a tricky question. I mean, I think that would have to be up to the Hall of Fame itself as to how they would deal with those situations, and whether those players would be removed.
Okay, and then my second question along those lines was basically for those that there is no cloud over. We're taking the word of some less than reputable people in the cases of Bonds and Clemens. They never failed a drug test, and basically people that were going to jail and questioned by the federal government said, hey, I gave steroids to this guy. Are we banking on that as the reason that they're definitely guilty? Obviously, in Bonds' case, he had some amazing growth as a human being over the course of 1996 through 2007. He just became a large individual. But if you look at somebody like Roger Clemens, I look like I'm in better shape than Roger Clemens did when he was playing. He looked like my uncle. So I mean, we're taking the word of a convicted criminal that Roger Clemens is also a criminal, although Roger Clemens has been an upstanding citizen. So I mean, are we taking that word? And then lastly, how much does how the player treats you as a reporter play into your role on voting for them? Because I do understand there are some players that are very borderline, and you know, like if they were a nice guy to the media, they get voted in, and the guy that was kind of a jerk doesn't. And I think David Ortiz is kind of falling into that category where he's a steroid user and he failed a test, and you know, he was a nice guy to the media, so he gets a vote. I think that he's the one steroid guy that's like, yeah, they're like, he's cool. Everybody else, not so much. But what are your thoughts on that? On disreputable people making claims against, I guess questionable people, and then also the role of the media and whether or not they like you in getting into the Hall of Fame.
On the first part, I mean, obviously that there's been a lot of different investigations. There's been the Mitchell report. I mean, I think, you know, in the case of a lot of these guys, we have some pretty clear evidence. You know, I guess is 100%. You know, like I said, I mean, if there's not a failed test, you know, once you know that was given by Major League Baseball, I mean, I guess that there can be some question. But I think you just looking at what the evidence is out there and the different you know, reports and the investigations that have gone on. I mean, I think you just have to take it all in and kind of make a determination of you know what you think is real. And obviously, you know, right. I mean, there could be some disreputable characters that are giving some testimony, and you just have to consider that. Well, on the second point, I at least for me, I mean, you know, whether you're, you know, how you deal with the media doesn't, to me, that doesn't matter at all. I mean, I went with, you know, I went with Jimmy Rollins. I didn't go with Ryan Howard. Ryan Howard was probably one of the most accessible superstars, you know, in the Phillies clubhouse for many years. And not that Jimmy was a bad guy or anything like that, but you know, Ryan was a lot more accessible. I mean, there's been plenty of other guys that, you know, you could look at Brad Lidge and Chad Durbin and Aaron Rowan that were, you know, probably some of the top guys to deal with. If they ever showed up on the Hall of Fame ballot, I wouldn't go for any of them. I mean, to me, that's not part of the equation. And I would think for most writers that would be the case. I don't think, you know, there's a lot of you know, local chapters give good guy awards for, you know, who's the most accessible to the media over the course of a season, and you know, that's what that's for. But you know, as far as the Hall of Fame goes, I don't think, you know, how you deal with the media should be, you know, really factored in at all.
Hey, Bill, it's Anthony. Real quick, I appreciate you coming on, giving us your time. I just have a couple quick questions, and we'll kind of wrap you up here. First, I agree with the Jeff Kent. You know, also, I'm going to say congratulations on your first year voting for this. So my thing is, my question for you is, how do you feel about voters who just submit a blank ballot at this point? I mean, I look at it, I'm seeing guys like Jeff Kent, who's only getting 20% of the vote. I think he's a Hall of Famer. So how do you feel as a fellow baseball writer of America voting, and then other people just submitting blank ballots?
I don't have a problem with it, to be honest. I'm kind of glad I wasn't one of those guys, but I mean, kind of going into it, I was thinking like, I knew there was probably not going to be a lot. You know, I knew I wasn't going to be close to 10, but you know, I figured I'd have a few guys, and I did, you know, take the time to look at everybody's numbers and, you know, just make sure I was right. But if you don't feel that anybody on the ballot belongs in the Hall of Fame, then I don't feel you should be obligated to vote for somebody for the Hall of Fame. I mean, if you look at it and just don't think that anybody belongs, you know, you can either not submit a ballot or you can turn in a blank one, which I would think actually turning in the blank one is probably, in my mind, more the right thing to do, because you're saying I don't believe anybody belongs, and that's your prerogative. You know, we've seen years like last year where nobody, you know, didn't make the cut, and it should be a challenge, you know, to get in. You know, it shouldn't be easy. So I don't have a problem with it. If you look at it and feel like there's nobody on there that's a Hall of Famer, then turn in a blank ballot until somebody, you know, comes onto the ballot that you think belongs.
That's fair. I kind kind of agree with that, I guess, too. If they don't feel good enough, then don't do it. But one other question here too is with these PEDs. What I appreciate from you is that you are across the board. You didn't vote David Ortiz, you didn't vote A-Rod, you didn't vote Bonds, you didn't vote Clemens, and I do appreciate that. But for some of those type of guys, I mean, obviously, Bonds and Clemens the last year, but for A-Rod and Ortiz, is there anything that moving forward in the future, the next 10 years, I mean, in case they don't get in this year, that would change your mind to make you vote for someone like that who may have alleged PED use?
I don't think I would change my mind. I mean, to me, and that's something else, I've never understood was, well, I don't think this guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, to me, you're a Hall of Famer or you're not a Hall of Famer. And so I think that the guys that I have on the ballot now, those 4 guys, I'll check them off again next year. And we'll I haven't really looked ahead to see who's coming on next year, but if there's anybody else, then I'll add to it. But more than likely, I don't think, I don't think I would change my mind. I mean, we could, if I looked at these numbers and thought they weren't worthy, and then maybe, in their first year and then 7 or 8 years later, those numbers seem to stand out a little more. Like nobody else was really kind of coming close to them. Maybe I'd look at it again, but I'm sure every year I'll take a look at everybody on the ballot, as they come along. But I would think my plan anyway is, I've decided these 4 guys are Hall of Famers. They're Hall of Famers going forward. The guys I didn't decide were Hall of Famers. I don't feel like I would vote for them in the future. If I can't imagine I would get to a point where I'm filled up with 10. If there was like some stellar year of first year guys, then I would probably have to make a decision. But right now I've got these 4 guys, and then I'll probably add to it. With the guys that come in as first year guys in the future that I believe belong.
Bill, this is Joe. Again, we appreciate you taking the time, and I kind of wanted to end this on a little bit of a lighter note, because I go back to the last couple of years and looking at the voting, and it even though this is your first year doing it, I'm sure you paid attention the previous years. 2 years stick out to me specifically. The first one, Ken Griffey Jr., 99.3%, which means there were 2 voters that did not vote for Ken Griffey Jr. As a voter now, looking back at that, did you sit there and question and be like, guys, are you kidding me? Like, really, 2 voters? And then you go to Derek Jeter, 99.7. 1 person didn't vote for him. I mean, I get it. We hear the stories over and over again about voters who say, well, you know what? I know this guy's going to get in automatically. I don't want to waste a vote on him because I want to use that vote for somebody that might fall off the ballot that I'd like to keep on the ballot. But I mean, 1 or 2 voters, especially in those cases of Ken Griffey Jr. and Derek Jeter. I mean, well, I hear you chuckling a little bit when I first brought it up. So, like, as a voter now, like, can you just, if I was a voter, I'd be like, I would just look at that person and be like, even though I don't think we knew who they were. I believe they kept themselves anonymous, I think for good reason. But it's just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I couldn't. And I think, was it Rivera was the first one a few years ago that was 100%. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, and which was surprising. And I was even surprised by that a little bit because I figured there would be some anti-closer bias out there, and so I was surprised that he got 100. But yeah, there were some guys that like I couldn't believe had never gotten 100%. You mentioned Griffey. I mean, one of the greats of his generation, and we talked about guys that were accessible to the media. He was, especially for a visiting player, that I dealt with a couple times, had some one-on-one interviews with, and a couple times when I interviewed him, we just had like I didn't know him that well, and we had like a 10-15 minute conversation after the recorder was off. He was just like that kind of open, welcoming type of personality. So I couldn't see what would what prevent you from voting for a guy like that. If somebody had a personal vendetta, like that they didn't deal with them well in the locker room. And I think that was the case like way back with like Ted Williams or whatever. But I couldn't see it. You know, there were some guys to me that there aren't too many slam dunks out there, but Ken Griffey Jr. would be a slam dunk. Derek Jeter would be a slam dunk. And I'm, you know, a couple of those guys have come up and they said, well, this is the guy that's going to be the 100% guy, and wasn't. It just surprised me. So yeah, I'm not sure what their thinking was, but you know, I guess everybody has their reasons.
Well, Bill Evans, I truly appreciate you taking the time, coming on here, speaking to us at length about this whole process. And again, on behalf of all of us here, again, congratulations on getting the opportunity to live out a dream that I'm sure a lot of people who love the game of baseball, who have followed the game of baseball, get to do. And that is, of course, cast your ballot for the Hall of Fame. And absolutely grateful for that, and grateful for you taking the time here late on this Wednesday night for joining us here on the show.
Thanks for joining us, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. Round of applause for Bill.
Happy New Year.
All right, you have a happy New Year.
Happy
Thanks,
New Year.
Bill.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
There you go.
All right. I mean,
that was
pretty
nice.
straightforward.
That's
Pretty
great.
straightforward.
He was so straightforward. He was honest. Those are great.
I saw you perk up. You perked up. Rook, you perked up when he said Jeff Kent, because I
was actually looking at his ballot already, so I knew he voted for him, so I was waiting for him. Because
you know what?
Come on,
Jeff Kent is one of those guys that the media hated.
Don't like.
And it's same thing with Kurt Schilling right now, is that a lot of people in the media hate him. You know, and whether I'm not here to debate people's politics. We're here to watch them play fucking baseball.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's that big question mark about Ty Cobb, about whether or not he was racist. Ty Cobb was not racist. I'll tell you that right now. I've read a lot about Ty Cobb. He actually has one of the largest endowments for scholarships to college for black youths, for African Americans, if you want to be weird about it. He actually has a scholarship for it. And the reason that they consider Ty Cobb racist is because his vernacular was that of a Southerner, like a hillbilly Southerner in 1920, which obviously is not PC. Say again.
He played the game hard. He played the game hard.
He was a douchebag, right? Everybody hated Ty Cobb. But you know, his vernacular was not good. He referred to black people in a less than positive manner, but that wasn't necessarily hatred. It was just the way he referred to them, because that's how it was referred to where he was from. You know, like it wasn't a pejorative where he was from. It was matter of fact.
Yeah.
But he was a douchebag. And by today's standards, being a douchebag like that, he'd not get into the Hall of Fame for being a dickhead.
Yeah. We're getting to the top of the hour. Just want to remind everybody you're watching and listening to the Sports Talk 365 Scoreboard Addicts live show here on YouTube, on the Facebooks and the MixLRs and all that stuff. And
on
like
the Facebooks.
Yeah. I want to get into the nitty gritty of it here, because we could look at this. We could talk about this all night and all day. Again, going off of this tracker, we mentioned, and again, it's insane at how the numbers and how they can project on these guys. So, and we didn't really get into it, and that's why I want to get into it now with you guys, where everybody stands as of right now and where they're heading according to this tracker. So right now, there's 23% of the ballots known. Not every one of these voters put their name out there and they get to check a box. If you look at the ballot, they check a box to say, hey, do you want your ballot revealed? And some of these guys do it on their own time, whatever the case may be. Again, all ballots are due by December 31st, so a couple of more days with that. We mentioned, and it goes off of this tracker, that there's going to be an estimated 392 ballots. Right now, only 84 public have been made and 6 anonymous that have been made. And in order for you to get to 75%, you need 294 votes to get to 75%. So let's take a look at right now off of the public ballots, which are 84, where guys are sitting right now. Right now, the big guys within the last years of their eligibility, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, 78.9%, both of them. Identical right now, because it's basically been the same voters who have been voting for these guys. And typically what we see, I will just let you know, because I follow it every year, what we see around this time, this is typically where they're at, where they look like they're in, but they start trending downward and they wind up not making it in. And as of right now, it's trending towards they probably won't make it in, but it's going to be close. But they're both at 78.9%. Curt Schilling has fallen a bit. He's at 70%. And don't forget, guys, Curt Schilling also requested that writers don't vote for him because he's over it. The fact that he's in the 10th year of his ballot, he's like, I'll just wait for the Veterans Committee. So he's requested guys to not vote for him. And he's actually lost 7 votes because of that so far.
Well, you know what, though? And I'll tell you this, that's bullshit because the sad part is the Veterans Committee will vote him in. Because it's, again, this is that, well, they're borderline. The media doesn't like him, so fuck him. He ain't getting in. Whereas it's the Mr. 3000 problem.
Yeah.
They made a whole movie about how the Baseball Hall of Fame is bullshit.
So Curt Schilling's at 70%. David Ortiz right now is at 82.2%. He's gotten 74 of the 84 public votes.
He shouldn't be in at all.
Then you have Todd Helton, who's at 56%. Andrew Jones is at 48.9%. Jeff Kent right now at 25.6%. Andy Pettit at 12.2%. Manny Ramirez at 41.1%. A-Rod is at 46.7%. Jimmy Rollins at 10%. Sammy Sosa at 23%. He doesn't look like he's going anywhere. But also, just so you guys know, you need to make 5% in order to stay on the ballot. If you fall below 5%, you're off. And right now, players like Mark Burley, Tim Hudson, Torrey Hunter, Tim Lincecum, Joe Nathan, Jonathan Papelbon, and Mark Teixeira are all at 1.1% right now.
What was David Ortiz's number again?
David Ortiz was 82.2%. And right now, he's actually trending that the way he's trending is that he's going to make it in, but he's going to make it in. I think Buster Olney tweeted this out a couple of hours ago. If the trends are the right way, he's going to make it in at 76.6%. So he's just going to get in at 7.
That's the problem. I mean, if you're going to let him in, you cannot tell me that anybody that never failed a test but is an alleged steroid user, right? We'll go with that. We'll use the word alleged because that's exactly what it is. You're going to tell me that you'd rather vote in David Ortiz than Barry Bonds. If they're both alleged steroid users, you cannot tell me that David Ortiz could carry Barry Bonds' jockstrap. The same with A-Rod. A-Rod gets in before David Ortiz. The same with Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens gets in before David Ortiz. I would even say Andy Pettit gets in before David Ortiz. Like that, Bill said, he played half a game. He was a DH, a career DH.
I don't have a problem with DHs. I don't have a problem with DH. DH was invented so that guys at the end of their career, like Mickey Mantle at the end of his career, Babe Ruth at the end of his career, Mike Piazza at the end of his career, could still hit. He couldn't play the field anymore, but we can keep 2 more years and watch the guy retire, with a little bit of class. He doesn't have to leave the game at 35 years old.
But
David
Ortiz can't play the field ever.
You put a glove in his hand and he was trash. He could only play one half of the game. And I'm sorry, I played baseball for a lot of years, and obviously I'm not a professional, but defense was the easiest part of the game to improve on. All you had to do was give a fuck, especially if you play first base, because the long and short of it is it's just you and the ball. That's it. That's it. If you want to get better at playing defense, have somebody hit you fly balls, because having somebody throw a curveball, they're actively trying to fuck with you. When you're playing defense, the ball's not sitting there throwing, oh, watch out, I'm going to curve on you real quick. The ball doesn't do that. All you have to do is try. Go out there, work hard every day, and you can become adequate. You may not become the greatest defender of all time, and you probably won't, but you can become serviceable. And when you don't do that, it's because you don't fucking care. And David Ortiz just didn't care about playing first base enough to help his team.
And my point with DH is that Edgar Martinez waited how long because he was a DH. And Edgar Martinez, I thought, was a better hitter than David Ortiz. All right? David Ortiz couldn't play defense to the point where every World Series they won, when they went on the road in the NL, he just didn't play, and he wasn't in the lineup. Like, your best hitter is not in the lineup because he hurts you by playing first base. Like, that's a problem to me. If you're not one, it's the PEDs, and then 2, it's the DH thing. He played half the game, and that's it.
I was going to say, that's why, I do understand why Bill was saying before that he was pleasantly surprised to see Rivera get 100%. Not the fact that he got 100%, but he was surprised because he thought he would have expected some of the voters out there to turn around and be like, oh, the whole closer thing. So it's really interesting when you look at that. So I just want to look at some more of the numbers just to get an idea of where we're at. So as we mentioned, 84 public ballots plus the six anonymous ballots. What is that? That brings us to 90 actual ballots. Okay. So out of the 90 ballots, 45 have put 10 players on their ballots. But here's the interesting part. There's one row in here that says votes needed for 75%. So now you're talking about we've taken away 90 ballots already. So now they only need 302 based on what the estimated ballot cast is going to be. Barry Bonds still needs 223 votes to get in, to hit that 75% mark. Roger Clemens needs 223 to get in. Todd Helton needs 243 to get in. David Ortiz would still need 220 to get to that 75% mark. Other notables, like I know he mentioned Curt Schilling needs 231. A-Rod needs 252. So, not a lot. And then when you look at, then you go down, there's a couple of lines down. Missed 2021 election by votes. Barry Bonds was 53 votes short last year. Clemens was 54 votes short last year. Curt Schilling was 16 votes short last year. And he's also now a -7. The biggest drop, though, guys, this year, the biggest drop has been Omar Vizquel. He's on his 5th year of the ballot. He has lost 28 votes since last year.
Did he say he was going to vote for Trump or something?
I have no idea. But he has lost 28 votes.
Because I know they hate on Mariano Rivera for that.
But wait, but this is the other thing I'm saying, though, is that, like, the reason why guys like Bonds and Clemens and even a David Ortiz and even an A-Rod, the reason why they're going to come close is because this ballot is not that strong. You go back to the following years, right? You go back to the following years, and I'm going to throw the names out to you guys of players elected the last couple of years and who have been on the ballot that they needed to get these guys off. And this is where I know a lot of these voters say, we got to get some of these guys off the ballot. That's where it's going to open up. Let's go back to 2014, right? 2014, because 2013, no players were selected. So I want to start from 2014. 2014 saw 3 players, Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, and Frank Thomas come in. This also had names like Mike Piazza, Craig Biggio, Jack Morris, Jeff Bagwell, Mussina, McGuire, Walker, Mattingly. Those guys were still on the ballot. Those were bigger ballots, okay? Then in 2015, you saw Biggio, Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, and John Smoltz get elected. Then in 2016, Ken Griffey and Mike Piazza. In 2017, Bagwell, Raines, and Pudge Rodriguez. In 2018...
Wait, no, stop right there. Wasn't Pudge Rodriguez listed in the Mitchell report?
Yeah, he was. He was. There you go. Then 2018, Vlad Guerrero, Trevor Hoffman, Chipper Jones, Jim Thome. 2019, Roy Halladay, Edgar Martinez, Mussina, Rivera. Then last year, Jeter and Walker. So these were the names that were on these ballots, and that's why certain guys didn't get the votes. Now you look at this ballot where guys like Bonds, Clemens, as I mentioned, Ortiz, they're going to get the votes because the ballot's not as strong. It's really not as strong. And if we wanted to look ahead, if we wanted to, I guess what it would be, 2023, right? Would be the Hall of Fame ballot that we're looking ahead to, because this is technically 2022.
Yeah.
Okay, so first ballot people coming in 2023 are going to be Carlos Beltran, John Lackey, Jared Weaver, Jacoby Ellsbury, J.J. Hardy, Aaron Hill. So the ballots are not that strong going forward. All the
Jacoby Ellsbury makes the Hall of Fame for being the shittiest player ever.
Oh, get the fuck out of here!
They need to burn the place down. If Jacoby Ellsbury
It's a Hall of Shame as opposed to a Hall of Fame. Jacoby Ellsbury.
You know what it is? It's the factor. What's pissing me off is that if Bonds is off the ballot and Clemens is off the ballot, and you let David Ortiz get in. It's a sham. It's a sham. You're doing a disservice to the Hall of Fame because if you let one, you have to open up the floodgates. If you're going to let one accused get in, you cannot sit there and say with any certainty, okay, you can't put your name to it and call them out straight up and tell them they were a steroid user because you're going to get sued. You can't say you have proof because nobody has proof. I think it's bullshit. And at this point, if you see now it open up and it gets a little looser with the steroid era and a little bit of forgiveness, I guess, if you will, and David Ortiz is there and Barry Bonds isn't, that's a sham.
You know, I agree with TJ on that one, but my other issue is also that, A, David Ortiz shouldn't be getting in on first ballot. If fucking Edgar Martinez ain't getting in on first ballot, David Ortiz shouldn't get in the first ballot, right? My other big problem is that what Bill said is that there was a question mark about whether or not Ortiz in fact failed. And if that's the case, and everybody that was released in that Sports Illustrated thing, there's a question mark under theirs too. And the MLB and the Yankees owe A-Rod a whole year's worth of salary because he never failed a drug test, and they suspended him for an entire season based on I don't even know what. And a lot of people were mad that
a mockery of baseball, pretty much.
A lot of people were mad about A-Rod suing baseball for suspending him for a full year because of his involvement, I guess, his knowing somebody who was distributing steroids. Okay. But usually the rest of the people that were caught up in that got suspended for 50 games. A-Rod got suspended for a full season as if he had previously failed a test. But the test that he failed is the same test that Ortiz is going, that's not true. The New York Times is writing lies about me because I'm from Boston. Are you fucking kidding me? I think the world has found out thus far that David Ortiz is not a good guy, banging drug dealers' wives in the Dominican Republic to the point where they're trying to murder him in the streets. Okay? David Ortiz is not a good guy. No, they didn't allegedly try to murder him. They tried to murder him.
No, allegedly banging drug dealers.
Oh, no, he did it. All right, fuck him. All right, fucking that gorilla-looking motherfucker. Fuck David Ortiz. I hate that bastard. All right?
All right, you're getting off track here. Anyway, I would say
tell me Nick is a Yankee fan without telling me Nick is a Yankee
fan. It's the fact that there's so much hate for A-Rod.
Played fucking right field, okay?
There's so much hate for A-Rod, and I understand the circus, but it was a media-driven circus around what happened. But are we all going to forget that, what's his name, Ryan Braun, essentially got a guy fired because he waited an extra day to get the fucking test in, and the guy tested positive, and then the guy went out of his way to try to fucking ruin that guy's life because, hey, I have a technicality, I have an out, so fuck you, I'm going to ruin your life, I'm going to take away your ability to get paid, because now I have it out to not get screwed over and not technically test positive, even though I fucking did.
Because you guys mentioned the word mockery before. I would say a mockery is this Mike Hunt.
Perfect name.
Mike Hunt voted for no one. He handed it a blank ballot. And I think it's
Michael Hunt says. I can agree with Bill's take though. Like we, Joe just broke down next year's ballot. I mean, it's pretty fucking thin. I can agree with if you don't see a reason to put somebody in the Hall of Fame and they just don't check enough boxes, you don't do it. But I feel like at this point, seeing the previous ballots come through where people don't vote, and it's like almost like you're mocking the fucking Hall of Fame. Like, I don't like these fucking guys. I don't care their numbers are Hall of Fame numbers. Screw you. I'm going to make a name for myself, and I'm going to make it about me, and I don't like that. I mean, I think there's a time and a place. Next year's going to be the time and a place, not even to submit a ballot. I mean, come on. But I agree with Bill's take 100%. But at the same time, in the past years where people have not submitted a ballot and there are hands down first ballot Hall of Famers on there, the writers need to be held accountable for being douchebags.
And the opposite of Mike Hunt was Mike Oxbig. He voted for Mike Oxbig voted for 10 players. We have a couple comments too, Joe. So just whenever you're done, get to those.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to actually kind of now just open the discussion for a little bit here on the fact that, we talked about it, TJ just pointed out, and I looked at the ballots coming up and how scarce it is. And then it goes back to what Bill was saying, now here's a curious thing. I'm curious where you guys are with this. What is the standard for the Hall of Fame these days? Statistical. What is the standard for the Hall of Fame in your opinion these days? Because this has also been another topic of conversation where I've had with friends, and they've been heated topic of conversations. Is 300 win, because listen, I was a huge advocate for Mike Mussina to get in the Hall of Fame. I thought Mike Mussina was a Hall of Famer because of the fact he still put up the numbers he put up his entire career in the AL East during the steroid era.
Yeah.
And he was a clean guy.
I agree.
And I think what was he, 289 wins? And again, people used to get on me because I said, to me, Pedro wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer. He had 190 wins. So granted, his ERA was great. He was dominant for a couple of years in a row. So I'm wondering where you guys are in your takes for what is now the new standard for the Hall of Fame. Is it 3,000 hits? Is it 500 home runs?
I think honestly, I think that standard is going to stay the same. I think 3,000, anything above 3,000 hits, you're getting in. I think anything above carrying 500 plus home runs, you're getting in, depending on your batting average, because obviously that's going to be a problem going forward now with the new way of swinging for the fences or fucking striking out, 170 times a season. But I think anytime a batting average,
I think there are guys in the Hall of Fame that are like below 260 hitters.
Right. And I think that's definitely a point of debate. But I think that the main numbers are always going to be there. 3,000 is always going to be there. If you hit above 3,000, you should be in the Hall of Fame. And I don't think anybody's going to contest to that. It doesn't matter if you play 20 years, 15 years, more power to you. You got 3,000 hits. There's only, the guys that hit over 3,000 are in the Hall of Fame. Minus, Pete Rose. But I think there's numbers that are pretty much sticking points for everybody. But the one intangible that I think a lot of people don't take into account is what that guy did for the team. And I know you read the list of rules and integrity and all that stuff, but I think what you put forward to the team, what were your performances in the playoff? Did you carry the team? Did you put the team on your back? Because I think then those numbers can shift a little bit, where if you're Mr. Clutch and you come in when you're needed and you can put up numbers, but you fall short of that 3,000 hits, you only have, 420 home runs, you only batted, 267 career. But when it counted, and you got those rings and you got those wins when they were needed, I think that's an intangible that gets overlooked a lot. But again, going forward, there's not really anybody on that ballot coming in next year that fits that category either.
It's pretty gross, actually.
It's disgusting.
But that's what I'm saying. All these guys, can you just take – but that's where I think we could all sit back for a second and look at the guys that made the Hall of Fame these last couple of years. Like, wow, we truly were blessed – to see the players that have come through the game and that have, did so much for the game. And now we're looking on, listen, we have Mike Trout in this game. Obviously we're seeing Shohei Ohtani bud into something spectacular, but it really goes to show that what we've seen in the past and these players that have made the Hall of Fame, controversial or not, are there. And it's just all right, what are we looking forward to? I think what we're going to look forward to now is, I think this is going to be, outside of the names that have come through the Hall of Fame these last couple of years, the big names, this is probably going to be the most anticipated one, because will the PED guys get in on their last ballot?
Open up the floodgates?
And where does David Ortiz? And that's what I'm saying, because I think writers, it's almost like you're just waiting for the first domino to fall, and then these writers that continue to come in, and now forget it. You get these younger writers that are coming in, they're going to just be like, whatever. It goes back to what I said earlier in the show. It needs to be a committee, and I'm talking about like baseball historian committees, like a Bob Costas and a Peter Gammons, and it should be a combination of writers and broadcasters, because Vin Scully has been around the game for 80 freaking years. That guy deserves a vote because he's seen these players throughout the game. He doesn't have a vote.
Listen, Right. We have these names in our head that they're getting in. But I think the biggest thing, and I mark it down, I think in 10 or 15 years, we're going to be sitting here discussing those numbers again. Like you asked, what is that standard of Hall of Fame? And I think the thing we're going to be discussing, well, it is disgusting, but what we're going to be discussing is how analytics is going to fuck up those numbers.
So I'm not a numbers person as far as that's concerned, because some people are compilers. They play 20 something years and they hit 500 home runs and they throw them in the same hat as Mickey Mantle that played 16 years and hit 500 something home runs. You know what I mean? So it's not really the same. To sit there and say it's the same is cute and all, but when you're looking at somebody like Julio Franco that played till he was 56 years old, like it's not the same, you know. And in hockey, you have guys like Mario Lemieux that played forever. You know, Jaromir Jagr played forever. It's not the same as a guy that played 15 years and put up crazy numbers.
That's a bad standard because Mario Lemieux and Jaromir.
No, I got that, but I'm saying is if Jagr put up numbers like Gretzky, that's not the same thing. It's not.
I would disagree.
But my point being is that I think it's more important to look at what that player meant to the game at the time they were playing and for how long. And I attribute it to somebody like Joe Namath. If you look at his overall stats when he went to the Football Hall of Fame, they're not that great. But for about 5 or 6 years, he was the greatest quarterback in football, bar none. Like it was him, 60 feet of crap, and then the rest of the league. And when you look at somebody like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of somebody who's like borderline that doesn't really have look at Jeff Kent. Jeff Kent doesn't have 500 home runs. And our friend Doc, who made a comment on YouTube, he just said 500 home runs is a stretch for some. Kent has 377 home runs or something, and it's the most ever for a second baseman. And if you look at somebody like Mariano Rivera, you look at him compared to his other pitchers, but he's a closer. Yes, he is the greatest closer in the history of the game, without question. He is the greatest closer.
He's the gold standard.
Standard. He's the platinum standard. They have an award named after the man. All right. And I think that's what you start thinking about. If somebody had their stamp on the game and you thought of that guy and you thought of excellence, and I don't put a lot of credence into World Series either, because you look at guys like Biggio that were unfortunately on bad teams. And they don't have World Series wins. Ted Williams doesn't have a World Series win. Okay. To sit here and argue that Derek Jeter is better than Ted Williams is friggin' crazy. Not only did Ted Williams bat 400, but he gave up like 2 years of his life to fly planes against the Japanese in World War II for the United States Marine Corps. How many hits would he have if he didn't lose that time to serve his country? Like,
I think kills should be a standard too.
If you go to the Hall of Fame, we've been to the Hall of Fame. They do put their logo. If you served in the military, they put your logo under your plaque. So it'll say under Ted Williams' plaque, it says World War II and the years that he served, and it has the Marine Corps logo. That's kind of cool.
72 kills.
But
how many people can say they hit home runs and killed a man?
But very rare.
But I'm not a stats person. I think it's really what you mean to the game while you play. Hopefully, it's in a positive situation, not a negative. But I think that there are some players that transcend the game, and maybe they don't have the numbers overall. But when you think of them when they played, you think, wow, that for about 5 years, that guy was the game of baseball. Like he was it. He was the bee's knees and the cat's meow.
I hate to keep beating this dead horse, but David Ortiz just hit. Imagine, I mean, to put it in a golf perspective, imagine if every time you got within 70 yards of the green, Phil Mickelson waltzed out there and hit a fucking flop shot to 3 feet. Didn't have to putt it, not part of his game. Didn't have to drive it in the fairway, not part of his game. He had to do one thing and one thing only, and he was great at that one thing.
Yeah, I get that. So just my viewpoint, it's hard to make a standard overall for every player. I think for me, one of the ones I think would be longevity. You know, not just a guy who played in, didn't play great like someone like Brett Gardner. He's had a long career, but he's not a Hall of Famer to me. Someone who's had a long. He's not a Hall of Famer.
Bring up Brett Gardner again during a Hall of Fame conversation, all right? Bring him up again. See what the fuck happens.
I'm curious, Rook, now you saying that, Ant, like, because you go on longevity. So I wonder if, like, a guy like, because the common debate is Don Mattingly, because his career wasn't as
he's borderline.
Thurman Munson.
I think he'll probably get in Veterans Committee type of guy. Like Don Mattingly, Thurman Munson will probably get in one of those Veterans Committee earlier.
They've been on the Veterans Committee for a long time.
No, I know, but
look
I'm
at how
saying
long
like
it took Gil Hodges.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, let me get back to my point. Anyway, so
Excuse
longevity,
us.
solid longevity too, like not just shitty years towards the back end of your career. Steady, very consistent. Obviously guys who are batting around 300 now. I mean, guys who bat around 300 really is rare at this point, especially for a career. So if you're at 295 or 300 and above, I think that's obviously a key point to get into the Hall. Another one I would think for pitchers would be you can't make it to 300 wins anymore. These guys just don't pitch as often. They're injured a lot. Some of them, a lot of them lose 2 or 3 years when they get, Tommy John. So for pitchers, I think I would lower that to maybe like a 250, maybe 225 type of thing for pitchers. And obviously ERA and strikeout numbers. Wins shouldn't be as much as important as look at DeGrom. DeGrom, I think, is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's probably going to have
not going to have any wins.
75 wins.
Exactly. And a lot of those losses he's going to have is 1-0 losses. So, I mean, to go into the the comments that we have right now, we have Doc here. So Doc, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate the comments. Anyone else, even if you're rewatching this, leave some comments and we look around the comments. We comment back to you guys. So, take a look at it, leave a comment. We'll get back to you. But Doc, he said, Bert Blyleven took forever to get in, and looking at Bert Blyleven's numbers, I mean,
Blyleven?
Blyleven. I don't know why I said but I agree with him. He took a while to get in. His numbers look like he is a Hall of Famer. I mean, he should have got in sooner, but that's just
that goes back to I'm not a numbers person. When I think of Bert Blyleven, he is an iconic name like Raleigh Fingers. It's just one of those people you hear the name and you're like, wow, that guy was really good for an extended period of time. And he kind of defines a generation. He's one of those names that pops.
Yeah. I agree.
Like Roger Maris isn't in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. But his name pops.
Kind of defines 2 MVPs, broke the single season home run record, two or three World Series, not in the Hall of Fame. And it's because he batted like 250 and he didn't hit 500 home runs.
And what's amazing,
Doc's other comment here is that 500 home runs is a stretch. I agree. It is a stretch. And he's saying this Kent is the 377 home runs, whatever it is, the number is the most ever for second baseman. If you have the most ever stat in your
position,
you should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry,
except
you're
pitcher,
best, except obviously pitcher. But if you're the best offensive player that ever played that position, you should be in the Hall of Fame. And Jeff Kent not being in the Hall of Fame is ridiculous.
And what Bill said, though, he did it in a park, in both parks out in San Francisco that are not hitter-friendly parks. So, that works for him too. But again, guys, this is going to be the never-ending debate. I think we could say after this year, though, because this is a highly anticipated one, only because, like you guys said, will it open the floodgates for sure? We'll just have to wait and see. But the names coming after these next couple of ballots are just absolutely dreadful. But this is a never-ending debate when it comes to the Hall of Fame. The voting process in itself, are there too many voters? What are the standards? Obviously, we all have our different opinions on the standards. And
so, Joe, real quick before we go, right?
I have one more comment too, Nick.
I have a proposal to make, and then Rook, you can make your comment. I say we just pick our Hall of Famers right now. Like,
that's what I was going to.
This year's ballot. Why don't we throw on who would we vote for if we had a vote?
So before we get to that, we had a tweet came in from our friend of ours, Matt O'Day. Thanks for listening and thanks for following us, Matt. He wrote, "How do you feel about submitting the blank ballots?" Which I think we already covered with Bill and we covered on our own as well. So if you listen along, we did answer that question for you. And then, as Nick was saying, who are we going to vote for? His other question was, if the pencil's in our hand and we're going to vote who we voted in this class, you have 10 votes. Where are you going with it? So I guess let's go around the square here. We'll start with Joe and we'll come back around to me at the end.
Oh, great. Meanwhile, I'm trying to scramble to get and see certain guys who I would vote for on the ballot, but I am looking at the ballot right here, right now in front of me. And I think, like you guys, I already said it. No PED guys are going in for me, so I wouldn't vote for them. But if I had to vote at this current ballot, I think Billy Wagner, believe it or not, would get a vote for me. 422 career saves. I think that's, I think that's an accomplishment in itself. Played 16 years, 2.31 ERA, over 1,100 strikeouts, actually close to 1,200 strikeouts. He was an all-star 6 times. He finished in the top 5 in Cy Young Award one time. That was in '99. One of those guys that are just under the radar type of thing. So I think Billy Wagner would get a vote for me. I think Todd Helton would get a vote for me as well, based off of including what Bill had said earlier. And quite honestly, outside of everybody else here, I think those are the only 2 I would vote for right now, because I'm going off of where these guys were in their careers. I look at, are they worthy to be enshrined in such a prestigious place? At some point, yeah, but like I said, I think probably only 2 guys for me, and that would be Helton and Billy Wagner.
All right. I mean, I'm on the other side of it. I think the whole prestige of the, purity of the game is out the window. I think Bud Selig is to blame. I think the MLB is to blame. And I think at some point you are going to get a steroid user in. It's going to happen. Not just a steroid, any type of PED user, it's going to happen. It's going to. So I think with that in mind, and just going for what these players meant to the game, I'm letting Barry Bonds in. I'm letting Roger Clemens in. I'm letting A-Rod in. Maybe not first ballot, because the mockery that was, caused around him, and the stir and all the chaos. But I think A-Rod should be there. After that, yeah, Jeff Kent should be in there. Todd Helton is definitely up there, and then Scott Rowland. But bar none, I think the biggest joke is the Curt Schilling, because of all the nonsense around his politics. I think Curt Schilling should be there. I mean, the guy had some heroics in the playoffs, in the World Series. His numbers are there.
It's ketchup.
Yeah. He sold the sock. Listen, him making bad business decisions and losing all his money for a shitty video game aside, he should be there.
Is that your ballot? That's it?
That's my ballot.
You're done.
Listen, I know it's heavy steroid users or PED users, but it's going to happen at some point, and you cannot tell me if you watch baseball in the 90s, you're going to poo-poo Barry Bonds. You're going to poo-poo Roger Clemens. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's what they meant to the game and the era that they played in. You give them the fucking pass at this point, because the MLB did it to themselves.
Poo-poo. All right, Nick, let's go. What's your ballot look like?
I'm with TJ on this. It's simply because I'm wearing the jersey of a guy who did performance-enhancing drugs. All right, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, they took amphetamine and helped them play 162 games. If we wonder why guys don't play 162 anymore, it's because they outlawed the amphetamine. All right,
I got some in the back.
You can't do coke. You can't do amphetamine. How the hell are you supposed to get up for 162 games? All right, but I'm voting for Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Todd Helton, Jeff Kent, Manny Ramirez,
wow,
Alex Rodriguez, but maybe not Alex Rodriguez this year because it's his first year. Maybe next year, but he's going to get my vote at some point. Scott Rowland, to me, Scott Rowland for our generation is the Brooks Robinson of his generation, the Gold Glove third baseman perennially. Like, he's just there, and he was a fine hitter as well. Curt Schilling is going to get a vote for me. Gary Sheffield. How are we just ignoring Gary? All right. Gary Sheffield played an amazing career for multiple teams. I think he loses some of his luster because he played for a lot of teams. In baseball is one of those sports. It's not like football where you can play for 12 teams and they'll be like, yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. Baseball is like, no, we have to put a logo on your hat. Oh, you never played more than 3 years for any team? Oh, then you can't be in the Hall of Fame. It's ridiculous. And having heard Joe say Billy Wagner's stats, I'm going to go with Billy Wagner. I was thinking Sammy Sosa, and then I thought about what Bill said. If he didn't do steroids, what would we be talking about him? And Sammy Sosa is one of those guys that without steroids, we don't even know who he is.
What about cork bat?
I mean, on top of doing steroids, he corks his bat on top of it. But I'm not holding it against him as far as him cheating. I just feel like it benefited him more than it benefited somebody like Bonds, somebody like Clemens, and somebody like Ramirez or Rodriguez.
You can't sit there and tell me that Barry Bonds wasn't the pinnacle of baseball for about 6 or 7 years.
The only time I ever saw the man look bad was when he got struck out by an 11-year-old.
All right, well, here are my picks. So I've been advocating for him all episode long, but Jeff Kent, 100%. Todd Helton, I agree with. Bill came on, I agree with that. I don't agree with the Scott Rowland and Jimmy Rollins. I know you guys said, Scott Rowland is the, the Gold Glove, perennial third baseman, but I just don't feel like he's, I don't know, maybe eventually, but not for this year. Same with A-Rod and Ortiz. I'm not voting for either of them on their first year. Maybe eventually. Bonds and Clemens will get my vote if I'm voting, because I just feel like they, even with the steroid use, their numbers are still incredible. And they should be in. They're Hall of Famers. I mean, Barry Bonds is incredible talent, one of the best that we may have ever seen.
Wait, you said you're not voting for Ortiz in his first year?
No, I would not vote for Ortiz in his first year.
You just went from going, let's be consistent across the board, whether it's his first year or not, but he's a steroid. He's a steroid guy.
That's not my reasoning. No, my reason isn't because that he's a steroid user. My issue is the DH thing. I'm not voting him because he's not a steroid user or alleged steroid user. Same thing for A-Rod. It's just that I think on they're not first ballot Hall of Famers. I don't think. But I eventually
just to clarify, you put you put an exclamation point on somebody who's first ballot.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
But I think that's anybody. I mean, having that mantra, being a first ballot Hall of Famer, means something. And the reason why I wouldn't put A-Rod there is I think there is still a little bit that has to be pulled back because of alleged PED use. But I think A-Rod, if that was never in his name, if PEDs and A-Rod never got brought up, I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
So, yeah, but his admission is what keeps me from voting him first year.
The only problem I had with the entire situation, the only problem I have with the entire situation as far as first ballot or non-first ballot has to come is if you're sacrificing somebody else on the ballot to put him on.
That's fair.
Then I'm okay with it. If you're only going to vote for 8 guys, put fucking A-Rod on the goddamn ballot if you think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Like, what are we sitting here doing? Whether you're a first ballot or a last ballot, you're in the Hall of Fame. It doesn't say first ballot on your plaque.
Exactly, I know. My last 2 votes probably go Kurt Schilling and Andrew Jones.
Oh, fuck. Andrew Jones. What year is it? That's why I didn't vote for him, because I was like, I got next year.
He's in year 5.
He's in year 5. I was like, I got next year. Okay, okay.
Next year, he's getting in. I mean, with what's coming up, he's getting in.
95, 2000, Ken Griffey Jr., Andrew Jones. Right here.
Yeah.
He's getting in next year. You have nobody else to vote for. He's getting in next year.
All right. I think that about wraps things up here. So, Joe, why don't you take us out, Joe?
Yeah, well, guys, it's been a pleasure. And like I said, this is a discussion that can absolutely go on and on and on, but we're highly anticipating to know what the results are going to be. I believe January 15th, I believe it's revealed on MLB Network. So we will know who's joining the Baseball Hall of Fame along with the players and people that were selected just a couple of weeks ago through the Veterans Committee and things like that. I want to thank our guest, Bill Evans from New Jersey Advanced Media, one of the first-time voters for the Baseball Writers of America, for joining us, giving his take on his ballot. And, of course, thank you for everyone at home for listening to us and watching us here on YouTube, simulcast on MixLR, Soccoa Media Radio. In case you missed these broadcasts, you can be sure to catch them right after we upload them, right after they're archived. But
shout out to our guy, Doc. Thank you for commenting. We appreciate it. We love the feedback.
Thanks to Matt as well.
Yeah. On behalf of the boys from the Scoreboard Addicts Podcast, TJ, Nick, Rook, I'm Joe Soccoa. Thanks for listening the show. See you guys next time.
Stay rock.